So while it's important to talk about the reasons why we may be disconnected from our family, I think the most important thing to follow up after that with is the fact that your blood ancestors are not the only types of ancestors that you have or can have. So, we'll talk first about the blood ancestors because it is important to understand that there are so many of those that it is absolutely outrageous. There were some great questions in the comments under some of the posts that I put up over the last couple of weeks while I was sharing that this class was on the way. And one of the questions that I got was basically, what do you do if the ancestors that you know about you don't like because they were engaged in some type of behavior that you don't agree with, or they had views that you don't agree with? And then the opposite question was also asked, which is, what if you live a lifestyle or you have views and values that you know that your ancestors would not have supported if they were alive? And that makes you nervous to reach out to them because you're concerned that they have those same views now that they are no longer alive. And I think the answer to both of those questions is the same, which is that when you ask that question, that tells me that you're automatically just thinking about a certain handful of ancestors that you happen to know about. But it's very important to keep in mind that represents such a small fraction of all of the ancestors that you have. I was doing some research before this class, trying to get a grasp on like a number for how many people have actually like contributed to all the people that are alive today. And the internet's a weird and crazy place. So the numbers were all over the place. There were thousands, there were billions. So it was hard for me to get like an accurate number. But one report that seemed fairly fair, because it seemed to be based like at least on math, was the idea that on one side of your family, let's say just on your maternal side of your family, if we assume that a generation spans about 20 years, and we go back to about the earliest humans that we can kind of know about, we're looking at something like 10,000 generations. That's just on one side. And for each of those generations, you would need two people each time. And then we'd have to do the same thing over on your paternal side. So we'd have like 10,000 generations, but you'd have two people each time. So you're looking at like two different family trees of at least 20,000 like people. That's a lot of people. There is absolutely no way in heck that all of those people feel the same way, think the same way, have the same culture, engaged in the same practices, had the same religion, spoke the same languages. We just know that they didn't. So when you think to yourself that your blood ancestors wouldn't like you or you wouldn't like them, realize that you're talking about a very small handful of the possible ancestors that you can connect with. One of the most helpful pieces of advice that I was ever given on my ancestral journey was all of our ancestors are to be prayed for. They are not all to be prayed to. Meaning, while we can pray for all of them to be in some state of peace, we don't necessarily and we don't actually at all want to go to all of them for guidance. So, yeah, if you are queer and you know that great great grandma was like totally a homophobe, we're not going to go to grandma to ask for advice on how to find love in our lives or to help bring us a partner, right? We can wish her well, but that's probably one of the ancestors that we would want to detach ourselves from and cut those energetic cords as opposed to honoring in some way or trying to connect with. And the good news is, grandma is not the only choice. You literally have thousands of other ancestors to choose from, and you don't even have to know their names. You literally are carrying them in every cell in your body. So they're already there. There are other types of ancestors that you can connect with as well. Maybe connecting with your blood ancestors is really something that feels so overwhelming or so impossible that you can't do it. This was the case for me. There are spirits that are adopted ancestors. And this is something that I had a huge question mark about. And if it wasn't for my own personal experience, I honestly don't know what I would tell you guys. But luckily, thankfully, I had this experience myself. So I can say with absolute certainty that yes, if you are adopted, your adopted family members are also connected to you, will also come through for you, will also guide you, and will serve as beacons of love and light in your life, just like a blood ancestor. In fact, there's a really good chance that your adopted ancestors will help you find more information about your blood ancestors if that is something that you want and something that you would benefit from in your life. In my life, that's what happened to me. As I said, I had no knowledge of my biological family, adopted under a closed adoption in the 80s, which meant even I couldn't get information from the courts about names and things of that nature. And I was really upset about that because I really did not know what to do. And I actually started my YouTube channel in 2019 for a number of reasons. But one of the things that I planned on doing was to debunk this idea that you needed to have an ancestral connection. Thank goodness. I had, something told me, I'm sure it was my ancestors, that said, you know what? You can't really get out here and start making videos claiming that you don't need to have an ancestral practice to be a powerful witch if you've never even tried it. Like, you got to at least give it a shot. You can't be out here teaching stuff that you don't really have real experience with. So try to have an ancestral relationship with something, anything. Just give it a go. And then if it turns out to just be a bunch of malarkey, it doesn't help you with anything. It's just a table in your room with some pictures and dumb shit on it. Take it apart and make your video. Tell everybody that you're out here casting spells and doing super hella accurate tarot readings and you don't have an ancestral connection, and all the witches that say you have to have one are just like, repeating shit that they heard, or just don't know, about more diverse experiences. So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to have an ancestral relationship. I'm going to try to connect with them and see what happens. And oh boy, did things happen. Because the situation caused me so much pain and strife, and because I was at a point in my life where I was questioning a lot of things. This is fairly recently, by the way, guys. This is like 5 or so years ago, maybe like a year before COVID. Um, I was questioning my marriage. I was questioning my career. I had dropped out of law school and was starting to wonder whether that was a smart idea. And I was feeling really lost, and like I had made a lot of wrong turns that I didn't know how to get on the right path with. And I was literally sitting right here in this living room on my couch with an oracle deck, crying my eyes out. And I looked up at the sky and I said out loud, like, today is the day. And this story still makes me emotional. Today is the day that, like, you guys have to show up for me right now. If you don't show up for me right now, I'm hanging all of this up. I will never make another altar. I will never light another candle. I am tired of feeling like I'm poking around in the dark, like I'm buying books and I'm getting crystals and I'm doing these things. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And I don't know if that's in my head. And I'm just tired of all of these questions. And I need to know that there is something bigger than me that loves me and cares about me and is going to help me get through this. Otherwise, I'm just going to be like, fuck it. I don't know, atheist, I'll figure it out. But I'm not going to sit here trying to follow a spiritual path that is not getting me up out of the shit that I am in right now. And when I was a child, I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, Robbie Glover. He was an older man, I mean, he was the patriarch of our family. He was born to sharecroppers in 1918 on land that those sharecroppers were once slaves on. Sharecropper is not a huge step out of that. So he was essentially almost born into slavery. And by the time he died, he owned enough land on that very same land to give all 6 or 8 of his children their own plots of land, including my mom, who lives on land that she owns because my grandfather went from being like dressed in rags, the child of sharecroppers, to having multiple businesses, owning property, and being able to pass on generational wealth to his children. He's somebody very special to me. And he has a very distinct way about him. He was a Gullah Geechee man. So if you've never heard the Gullah Geechee accent, I encourage you to like look it up on Google. It's not like any other type of Southern accent. It's a very African type of accent. And he had a very distinct way about how he walked because he was very old by the time I came along in life, and he needed a walker for certain periods of that, and had some hip replacements and all of that stuff. And I cried out and said, I have to absolutely see something like right now, today. And I flipped through my Oracle deck, the only one that I owned at the time. Didn't buy it for myself, it was a gift. And I turn over the Ancestor card. And clear as day, to this day, I feel like I could still almost see him. You know that feeling you get when you know somebody is standing right next to you? It's like you can feel their energy bubble. That energy bubble literally came into being right in front of me. That man was standing right in front of me. I could smell him. I could hear him. I could feel him. He was right there. And I needed that more than anything. And I always thought that that couldn't happen because he wasn't my real grandfather. I'm adopted. And I just assumed that my adopted family could not really do that for me. So for him to show up like that with complete clarity, and in case I had any doubt, for me to turn over this card, I knew that I was going to be okay. I knew that I could keep going. And most importantly, I knew that the fact that I was adopted did not mean that I did not have ancestors. And the fact that I don't know my blood ancestors does not mean that I cannot have a relationship with my adopted ancestors. He made very clear that day that the fact that we were not blood related did not matter. The ancestor that you need to connect with is the one that will step forward, and they are going to fall in one of these 4 categories, or perhaps even a couple that I don't even really know about. For me, it was my adopted grandfather who stepped forward and said, I know that you know what I look like, what I feel like, what I sense. I know that if I step forward, you will know that it is me, and I can help you with the rest. At that point, I was 30, maybe like 32, 33 years old. And I had on several occasions tried to find my biological family. As I said, closed adoption, court records won't even be released to me. I think they've changed the law now, but it was very difficult. And I put myself on registries, I researched registries, I did all this stuff to try to find my biological family, and nothing worked. So I'd kind of given up. And then I made connection with my grandfather. And within 2 months of that day, I had the name of my biological mother in an email on an account. Because of my adopted grandfather guiding me, I was led to take an ancestry test. I was led to register myself on the website, thinking I would never find anybody because here I am, 32 years old. No one's ever tried to find me before. So I don't know. Maybe they don't live in the country anymore. Maybe, God forbid, they're all deceased. I don't know what to think. And within a couple of months, not only did I have a makeup of myself genetically, which is all I was hoping for. I was like, let me just do one of these tests. I just want to find out, like, I don't know, am I Puerto Rican? Like, where am I from? Let me just get the genetics. I'm getting older. I need to know if I have like medical red flags. So let me just get like a report. So not only did I end up with a report that breaks down my ethnic ancestry, but something that I was not expecting was that right there in the list of cousins and fourth cousins and second cousins and potential aunts and various other family members, there was my mother, full name and all. So these types of ancestors that you can connect with will lead you to other ancestors if that's what you need for closure, for development, for your well being, for answers, for guidance. You will start with the ones that you are able to connect with, and they will help you to reach the ones that you may have thought you never could know anything about. And I didn't learn that in a book. No one taught that to me. I can tell you that because that is what happened to me. So aside from blood ancestors and adopted ancestors, there are also spirit ancestors. These are the spirits of people who have made an agreement or an arrangement to be connected to you or to your family for some reason or the other. These are godparents in many cases. I think kids nowadays, like they name anybody their godparents. But back in the day, a godparent was a very serious decision. It was usually a decision that was sworn before either a legal party or in front of clergy. In my case, it was clergy. My god family, godmother, godfather, and godsister are all unfortunately now deceased. They all died within a 10-year span of each other. But when I was a baby, they stood up at the front of Mount Zion AME Church in Harlem with my mother and father, and they put their hands on Bibles, and they swore that if anything were to happen to my parents, that they would step in and take care of me. And for all of my life, they treated me like I was their daughter. They would take me off of my mom's hands when she was a little stressed out or needed to go down south to visit family or something like that. They always looked out for me. My god sister always treated me like her actual little sister. And now that they are over on the other side, they are continuing to watch out for me because of the arrangement and the pact that they entered into, that they took so seriously when they were alive, that it remains intact. They bound themselves to me in that ritual, and that bind is still there. And you may not have an instance like that directly for you, but members of your bloodline may have entered into similar pacts like that. So there are spirit connections with certain beings that promise to look out for you, either specifically, or promise to just look out for your family line generally, and you just get to reap the benefits of that. But because time has passed, because information has been lost, because of whatever disconnect you have with your family, you might not be aware of all of these different beings that promise to look out for you. So those are spirit ancestors. And then there are ancestors of culture and affinity. There are people who have essentially risen to the level of protector or of matriarch or patriarch of a certain cultural group, a certain affinity group. So you might hear phrases like, this is the mother of all fashion icons. Well, if you are someone in fashion, this might be an ancestor of yours. This spirit might show up at a time in your life where you are stepping into that part of your life. We talk about Hecate as being the queen of the witches. And now that I've had the opportunity to coach so many witches, I've literally at this point in my life had conversations with hundreds of witches. The same story keeps coming up with them. I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden I feel called to Hecate. I don't know. I don't get that. Like, I'm African. What do I care? What do I have to do with Hecate? I'm Asian. I don't get it. I don't understand. I have no interest in deities. I don't know. Hecate, she kind of scares me. She's on the dark side. Why would I want to know anything about this Hecate person? Why do I feel called to her? Well, because she's the queen of the witches. She's the mother of the witches. She is an ancestor of that affinity group. So when you start calling yourself a witch, she's going to step forward and come to you because she is one of your ancestors. The godfather of rock and roll. Someone who has been elevated to that level of status. Anybody who picks up a guitar, guess what? That's your ancestor. And if you are in need of guidance, specifically in that area, you can be pretty sure that you're going to be able to establish a connection with them that will probably feel just as powerful as the one I felt with my actual adopted grandfather. So I break all of these types of ancestors down so that you know that the world of ancestors available to you is way too huge for you to be worried about whether or not you would have liked this grandmother or this uncle would have liked you. You have plenty more options than just the few people that may have occurred to you as being available to you as ancestors. So I see that we've had a few people come into the room since I started. Welcome, witches. I'm so glad that you are here. I want to give everybody the opportunity to enter into the giveaway. So I'm going to take this moment to jump back to that screen and give everybody a quick 2-minute break.